Greetings, Guardians. Welcome back to Olympus Alliance. Today, we turn our attention to a tank whose greatest weapon isn't simply how much damage he can absorb. It's where he forces the battle to happen. A warrior whose faith is made of iron. A hunter feared by demons. And one of the rare heroes capable of completely disrupting the enemy formation. Today, we're talking about Luther, the silent hunter of demons. And if you've ever looked at Luther as simply another frontline tank, you're missing the most dangerous part of his design. Because Luther doesn't wait for the enemy to come to him. He goes directly into their formation. And once he's there, the battlefield changes. Let's break him down. Luther's doctrine of purification, as well as his doctrine of faith, increases his own magic defense. And for a frontline tank, that's extremely valuable. He's naturally positioned where heavy incoming pressure can arrive very quickly, especially against teams relying heavily on magic damage. But survivability is only the beginning of what makes Luther interesting. Because Luther has something very few tanks can reproduce. He jumps. Not slightly forward. Not toward the nearest enemy. Luther launches himself directly into the center of the opposing team. And Guardians. That single movement can create two completely different problems for the enemy. The first is direction. Think about heroes whose attacks depend on where they're facing. Normally, the enemy formation is predictable. Frontline here. Damage dealers behind. Supports further back. Everyone facing the same direction. Then Luther lands behind part of that formation. Suddenly, enemies in positions 2 and 3 can turn their attention toward him. And that matters. Direction-oriented area of effect attacks may no longer travel through your team the way your opponent intended. Instead of firing forward into your formation, the hero may now be dealing with Luther somewhere completely different. One jump has changed the perspective of the battlefield. And when direction changes, certain attacks change with it. But the second consequence may be even more important. Positioning. Many Hero Wars teams depend on heroes remaining in specific positions relative to one another. Some buffs. Some healing. Some support interactions. They depend on nearby allies or particular battlefield positioning. Luther doesn't politely respect that formation. He lands right inside it. And suddenly the structure can begin to break. Heroes that depended on nearby support may become separated. Connections can become less effective. Damage dealers can become more exposed. And while the enemy is trying to reorganize, Luther isn't finished. Immediately after landing, he creates a heat wave that damages and stuns the enemies in front of him. And think about where he has just landed. Inside the enemy formation. That means the heroes being disrupted can potentially include some of the enemy's most important damage dealers. And a stun damage dealer isn't dealing damage. They're not moving. They're not maintaining momentum. They're losing time. Luther isn't simply surviving inside enemy territory. He's creating chaos inside it. And even though we're talking about a tank, don't completely ignore his offensive pressure either. His ultimate can hurt enemies with lower armor while also stunning nearby targets. So his kit begins to make much more sense when you stop judging each ability individually. Magic defense helps him survive. His jump changes direction. His positioning disrupts formations. His heat wave introduces another stun. And his ultimate provides additional damage and control. Luther's real weapon is disruption. But sending a tank directly into the enemy team creates an obvious problem. He needs to survive there. And that's where his allies become extremely important. Let's begin with Hus. Hus provides powerful healing support that can help sustain Luther while he's fighting inside the opposing formation. Remember, Luther isn't necessarily standing safely beside the rest of his team anymore. He's deliberately putting himself in danger. So giving him strong sustain allows him to continue doing what makes him valuable. Remaining inside the enemy team. Drawing attention. Disrupting positioning. And creating control. Then we have Artemis. This is a particularly interesting interaction because Artemis' smart arrow can trigger whenever Luther stuns an enemy. And Luther has multiple opportunities to create those stuns. So his control isn't only helping himself. It can become part of Artemis' offensive engine. Luther creates the opening. And Artemis takes advantage of it. Next is Tristan. Tristan can increase Luther's physical attack and armor penetration. And this makes the offensive side of Luther considerably more threatening. Remember what we said earlier. He's a tank. But that doesn't mean his damage should automatically be ignored. When Tristan amplifies those offensive attributes, Luther can apply significantly more pressure while he's already disrupting the enemy formation. Then we have Soleil. One of the biggest dangers for a hero deliberately jumping into enemy territory is becoming controlled before he can accomplish what you brought him there to do. Soleil can help protect Luther against stun, silence and blind. And that protection can be extremely valuable. Luther wants to enter, disrupt, control, and remain active. The less opportunity the enemy has to shut him down, the more annoying his presence becomes. And finally, Burner. Another excellent option for sustaining Luther on the front line, and while he's operating deep inside the enemy formation. But Burner brings another interesting benefit. She can increase Luther's energy gain. More energy means reaching his ultimate faster. And more ultimates mean additional opportunities for Luther to apply his damage and nearby stun. So when building around Luther, don't simply ask, what heroes make my tank harder to kill? Ask something more important. What heroes allow Luther to keep disrupting the battlefield? Hus gives him sustain. Artemis takes advantage of his stuns. Tristan increases his offensive pressure. Soleil helps protect him from control. And Burner combines sustain with increased energy gain. Different allies. Different purposes. But all supporting the same fundamental idea. Keeping Luther active where the enemy absolutely does not want him to be. And that's why Luther is such an interesting tank. His value isn't measured only by the damage he absorbs. Sometimes the most important thing a tank can do is make the enemy fight the wrong battle. Force someone to turn around. Break an established formation. Separate heroes from their support. Interrupt a damage dealer. Create a stun at exactly the wrong moment for your opponent. That's Luther. The silent hunter of demons. A tank who doesn't simply defend his own front line. He invades yours. So Guardians, tell us in the comments. Are you currently using Luther? And which heroes are you pairing with him? If you've discovered another strong Luther combination, share it with the Olympus community below. Because sometimes one interaction can completely change how we look at a hero. If this guide helped you, leave a like, subscribe to Olympus Alliance, and stay with us for more hero breakdowns, testing and strategies. Stay tuned. Stay sharp. And as always, salute and friendship.